started with a single instruction delivered quietly through the private corridors of Clarence House. An instruction so shocking that even senior aides reportedly froze when they heard it. Prince William had allegedly authorized the removal of Queen Camilla's personal belongings from a private royal wing, once considered untouchable. At first, palace insiders dismissed the whispers as exaggerated gossip. But within hours, staff movements, sealed inventories, and tense closed-door meetings suggested something far more serious was unfolding behind royal walls.
For decades, the British royal family survived on one golden rule above all else: silence. That silence shielded the monarchy during scandals, guarded it through crises, and preserved the powerful illusion that even the deepest royal wounds could easily be hidden behind highly polished palace doors. But, according to whispers now spreading fast through royal circles, that silence may finally be collapsing under the weight of an intense internal power struggle that has been building quietly for months. Reports suggest this conflict reached its most explosive point after Prince William secretly approved sweeping changes inside one of the most highly restricted areas connected to the royal household, an area long believed to represent not merely simple comfort or privilege, but direct influence itself. Those familiar with palace operations claim this decision was handled with absolute extraordinary secrecy. Senior royal aides allegedly received instructions late in the evening while security access reportedly shifted, without any public explanation. Within hours, household staff were reportedly spotted moving carefully sealed boxes through dim corridors that are usually left untouched during late-night operations. At first, many believed it was just a routine shift. Royal residences are constantly being reorganized, especially during times of transition or historic renovations, but worried insiders whisper that this situation felt entirely different. Thick tension filled the air. Staff members allegedly avoided having any conversations in open hallways, and senior courtiers reportedly stopped discussing sensitive household matters over palace phone lines. Even long-time royal aides figures, usually described as emotionally unshakable, after decades of serving the British Crown, were reportedly looking deeply unsettled by the extreme speed and seriousness of what was unfolding behind closed doors. According to shocking whispers, Queen Camilla was left completely blindsided after learning that these massive changes had already started moving forward internally. Sources close to the royal staff suggest she initially believed these rumours were wildly exaggerated or even deliberately planted by hostile insiders. But as inventory lists were quietly reviewed and access arrangements were allegedly reconsidered, the harsh reality reportedly became impossible to ignore. What makes this situation even more chilling is the timing. King Charles III, already described by royal commentators as physically exhausted and emotionally drained during his ongoing public health battles, now appears completely trapped between two impossible loyalties. On one side stands Queen Camilla, the woman who spent decades rebuilding her public image after years of intense controversy and media scrutiny. On the other side stands Prince William, the future king, who is increasingly viewed by palace insiders as determined to tighten his grip on the royal institution he believes he must soon protect. Reports suggest tensions escalated following a confidential disagreement involving future royal arrangements, deep inheritance discussions, and long-term household authority. While no official details have emerged publicly, close insiders claim this explosive dispute was never truly about mere possessions or rooms. It was all about strategic positioning, influence, and who would ultimately shape the British monarchy during the highly uncertain years ahead. Royal commentators have already begun describing this situation as the absolute clearest sign yet of a silent, unofficial transition happening behind palace walls. For months, keen observers noticed subtle changes in William's approach. He has appeared far more authoritative, more decisive, and less willing to tolerate any internal instability. Some insiders even claim senior palace figures have quietly started treating him not simply as heir to the throne, but as the stabilizing force who is already preparing for the next era of royal leadership. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's position reportedly became increasingly delicate as rival factions within the institution allegedly formed around competing visions for the British monarchy's future. According to whispers circulating among the royal staff, aides were explicitly instructed not to discuss any movements connected to the private wing under any circumstances. That extreme level of secrecy only intensified suspicions that what was unfolding carried consequences reaching far beyond a routine household adjustment. And perhaps the most devastating detail of all came from those who allegedly witnessed Queen Camilla's raw reaction after the harsh decision became completely undeniable. Sources suggest she was left deeply emotional and shaken, not only by the sudden removals themselves, but by what they actually symbolized. Because within royal life, private spaces are never simply private spaces. They represent trust and vital access. The closer someone stands to the very heart of the monarchy, the greater the influence they are believed to hold. According to insiders, William's decision sent a brutal message echoing through palace corridors that could never be misunderstood. The future structure of royal power may already be changing quietly and permanently, and those massive changes are now beginning to expose deep fractures that the monarchy spent years desperately trying to conceal. But the real shockwave wasn't the removal itself. It was the chilling reason insiders believe William finally decided this private wing could no longer remain under Camilla's direct control. For years that private wing had existed almost like a hidden kingdom within the royal household, quiet, protected, and rarely discussed in the public eye. Yet, according to long-circulating palace whispers, it had slowly become one of the most sensitive areas of political influence surrounding Queen Camilla. And now, for the first time, that invisible protection appeared to be collapsing from within. Inside the British monarchy, influence has never depended solely on official titles or public appearances. The real power, according to generations of royal insiders, almost always exists in private corridors, quiet conversations, and the invisible circles surrounding the sovereign himself. That is exactly why this particular wing inside the royal household allegedly carried such extraordinary significance for so many years. While the public focused on grand ceremonies, speeches, and official royal duties, those familiar with palace life claimed this secluded section quietly evolved into one of the most heavily guarded inner sanctums connected to Queen Camilla's position within the monarchy. Reports suggest it became much more than a residence, more than a retreat. It allegedly became a highly controlled environment where trusted allies, personal advisors, and carefully selected figures operated completely beyond the reach of wider royal oversight. According to insiders, that growing exclusivity slowly began raising serious concerns among senior members of the Coup family long before the current crisis even erupted into whispers of open conflict. Various interpretations from palace sources suggest Camilla increasingly relied on this private wing as a form of protective fortress during the highly difficult years following Queen Elizabeth II's death and King Charles's declining health battles. Those close to royal operations whisper that the atmosphere surrounding the entire area changed dramatically over time. Access reportedly became much tighter and invitations became far more selective. even long-time staff members were said to notice subtle but unmistakable shifts in how movement around the wing was tightly controlled. Some insiders claimed certain aides loyal to other senior royals quietly complained about barriers being placed around direct communication with the king during highly sensitive periods. While none of these claims have ever been publicly confirmed, the rumours themselves began feeding a growing sense of deep unease inside palace circles already struggling under enormous pressure. As King Charles's health difficulties reportedly intensified, Prince William allegedly became increasingly concerned about who truly held influence closest to the monarch during these moments of extreme vulnerability. According to sources familiar with the internal tensions, William viewed this situation not simply as a personal family matter, but as an institutional crisis tied directly to the future stability of the British Crown itself. Reports suggest he became deeply wary of what some insiders described as informal power structures growing around the king, while official palace authority appeared increasingly fragmented. That growing fear reportedly widened existing fractures within the royal household. Quiet factions allegedly emerged behind closed doors, with some courtiers remaining fiercely loyal to Camilla, believing she deserved protection after decades of relentless public hostility and massive personal sacrifice right beside King Charles. Meanwhile, others quietly aligned themselves with Prince William, increasingly convinced the future king was preparing to assert much firmer control over royal operations during an uncertain transition period that was already beginning to cast a dark shadow across the entire institution. Sources also whisper that Catherine, Princess of Wales, had grown privately deeply uncomfortable with the toxic atmosphere surrounding this whole arrangement long before the current bitter dispute became absolutely impossible to contain. According to top royal commentators, Catherine's concerns were never believed to be personal in nature. Instead, they are deeply connected to the broader emotional strain currently building within the royal family itself. Palace insiders claim she worried about growing divisions, shifting loyalties, and the deep emotional exhaustion consuming senior members of the monarchy behind tightly closed doors. Meanwhile, major media outlets and royal analysts began quietly connecting all these ongoing tensions to much larger succession era anxieties already forming beneath the surface. The British monarchy, so long defined by discipline and strict unity, suddenly appeared incredibly vulnerable to these same dangerous undercurrents that had fractured royal households throughout history. And according to those closely familiar with daily palace operations, the intense conflict finally reached a breaking point after one tense private conversation William reportedly could no longer ignore. Whatever actually happened inside that private royal meeting changed absolutely everything. By the following morning, palace aides were allegedly working under a state of unusual urgency. Security schedules shifted without any explanation, and senior staff were warned that significant household adjustments were now imminent. Something had clearly pushed William past his absolute limit of patience. According to palace insiders, the tense atmosphere surrounding that meeting was unlike anything many staff members had witnessed in years. Conversations reportedly stopped when certain officials entered the corridors. Advisors who normally moved calmly through royal operations were suddenly described as tense, highly guarded, and emotionally drained. Sources close to the situation whisper that Prince William arrived carrying heavy frustrations that had been building quietly for several months beneath the thin surface of public unity. While official details remain tightly protected, reports strongly suggest that this discussion involved senior household figures, trusted advisors, and key individuals connected to the long-term structure of the British monarchy itself, and by the time the meeting finally ended, insiders claim it became painfully obvious that something inside the royal family had fundamentally shifted forever. At the centre of the alleged disagreement were massive growing concerns surrounding future authority, private estate influence, and the invisible balance of power surrounding King Charles III during one of the most fragile periods of his historic reign. Various interpretations of the tense situation suggest William had become increasingly alarmed by what he viewed as blurred boundaries between personal influence and institutional decision-making inside the palace. Sources close to royal operations claimed the Prince of Wales believed stronger safeguards were absolutely necessary to protect the crown from becoming emotionally divided during the king's ongoing serious health difficulties. That fear reportedly intensified after confidential household discussions began touching on highly sensitive future residential arrangements, internal access, and long-term positioning connected to the monarchy's next chapter. What had once existed as quiet discomfort allegedly transformed into open concern behind closed doors. King Charles, according to those familiar with the meeting, reportedly attempted to calm tensions before they spiraled into an open fracture. Insiders described the king as deeply emotionally exhausted and determined to preserve peace between the people closest to him, while simultaneously avoiding a major confrontation that could completely destabilize the family during an already highly vulnerable and vulnerable moment. But top palace commentators suggest King Charles may have underestimated just how determined Prince William had become. Reports indicate the future king increasingly viewed himself not simply as a son navigating difficult family dynamics, but as a guardian responsible for protecting the historic institution from internal instability before it became completely irreversible. That sense of responsibility allegedly hardened his position. One source even described Prince William as appearing coldly focused during parts of the discussion, convinced that hesitation would only deepen divisions already threatening to consume the household from within. Adding even more tension were whispers that highly confidential documents, private arrangements, and sensitive residential considerations may have entered the intense conversation. While no verified information has emerged publicly, insiders claim certain household matters previously treated as untouchable were suddenly being questioned at the highest levels. Palace staff reportedly sensed almost immediately that lines had been crossed during the meeting that could never fully be repaired. Several insiders later described the tense atmosphere as icy and emotionally exhausting, with senior figures allegedly leaving these discussions visibly shaken by how severe the disagreement had become. The emotional weight of it all reportedly hung over the entire palace by the following morning, when unusual operational changes began quietly unfolding behind the scenes. For Queen Camilla, however, a key speed of this rapid escalation allegedly came as a devastating shock. Sources whisper that she believed tensions would eventually cool behind closed doors, just as royal disagreements so often had in the past. Instead, insiders claim the entire situation accelerated with startling force once Prince William reportedly approved immediate internal changes connected to the private wing. Household staff were allegedly instructed to begin reorganizing residential spaces without delay. Security arrangements quietly shifted and inventories were reviewed. Access procedures reportedly changed almost overnight. To outside observers, the palace still projected perfect silence and control, but behind the walls of royal life insiders, claim emotions were spiraling dangerously close to open rupture. And while Camilla reportedly believed the disagreement would stay behind palace walls, the next move transformed a private dispute into a deeply devastating personal humiliation. Late that evening, under dim palace lighting and an unusually heavy security presence, household staff were reportedly seen moving sealed containers through service corridors normally closed during late nighttime hours. Witnesses described the atmosphere as incredibly tense, silent, and deeply uncomfortable as, though everyone involved understood they were participating in a historic moment, the monarchy would later struggle to explain. According to insiders familiar with daily palace operations, the relocation process began with almost military precision. Staff members allegedly received direct instructions only moments before movement started, leaving many with very little understanding of what they were truly participating in. Reports suggest personal belongings connected directly to Queen Camilla were quietly catalogued, fully documented and transferred away from the private wing that had so long represented one of the most protected areas surrounding her role inside the royal household. Those present later described an eerie silence hanging over the corridors as containers moved through, restricted passages usually untouched during late-night hours. Some palace aides reportedly avoided speaking entirely. Others allegedly refused to ask any questions, fearing they could become entangled in a situation already carrying dangerous political and emotional consequences within the royal family itself. What made the atmosphere even more unsettling, according to various palace whispers, was the bizarre behaviour of senior staff overseeing the operation. Sources claim that employees were specifically instructed to avoid eye contact, limit unnecessary communication, and remain completely silent regarding absolutely anything they witnessed. That extreme level of secrecy immediately intensified fears that this was not simply a routine household adjustment, but part of something far more symbolic and devastating. Royal insiders later claimed many loyal staff members appeared visibly shaken, particularly those who had served, recalling past eras of royal chaos with Princess Diana, Prince Andrew, and those dark times when bitter family feuds threatened to spill out directly into the public eye. Indeed, some observers even describe that heavy night as carrying the very same suffocating tension that always grips the royal house during major moments of historic transition for Queen Camilla. However, key palace insiders suggest the raw emotional damage became impossible to conceal once she finally realised this eviction process was genuinely moving forward. Shocking reports whisper that until those final hours, she truly believed Prince William's ruthless actions were nothing more than symbolic power plays meant to force a quiet compromise behind closed palace doors. But as her personal belongings were packed away for relocation and daily household routines changed, the painful reality allegedly struck her with devastating force. Sources close to the household staff described Camilla as completely devastated and blindsided not just by these sudden operational changes, but by what they seemed to represent. After all, within the high-stakes world of royalty, absolutely nothing ever happens by accident. Every single room, every tiny privilege, and every point of access holds immense weight tied directly to institutional hierarchy, trust, and real influence. According to veteran royal commentators, this sudden eviction sent a chilling warning that Prince William's raw authority within the monarchy was no longer just theoretical. His power was starting to manifest in brutal ways that even senior royals could no longer ignore. Perhaps most shocking of all are whispers that King Charles himself was not fully informed until parts of this operation were already well underway. While no official confirmation exists, several insiders claim the king was updated only after key staff decisions had begun rolling through the royal household. That shocking possibility alone reportedly triggered immense panic among senior palace aides, who were terrified the situation might spiral into a massive constitutional embarrassment if any details leaked out to the media too quickly. Worried royal advisers reportedly feared devastating leaks during every stage of that long night, especially as sudden staff movements became nearly impossible to hide within. Exclusive palace circles already deeply consumed by bitter rumours and paranoia, royal commentators immediately began comparing this tense situation to historic shake-ups during past moments of succession anxiety and bitter internal crisis, arguing that this dramatic showdown resembled the quiet, ruthless consolidation of power often witnessed right before major transitions of authority within the British monarchy. And throughout this entire painful ordeal, Kate Middleton reportedly remained completely silent. According to sources close to the royal family, the Princess of Wales carefully avoided any involvement, choosing instead to stand loyally by Prince William's side, refusing to worsen the drama with any public confrontation. Her silence only fueled massive speculation, because to many observers the dramatic events unfolding behind closed palace doors no longer seemed to be about simple household logistics. Instead, they were being interpreted as a profound symbolic transfer of power toward Prince William's future reign. A clear sign that the next era of the royal family is already taking shape, while the current one struggles to survive. Yet the devastating emotional fallout inside the palace was only just beginning. By morning, painful whispers of betrayal had already spread like wildfire through royal circles. As the household woke to rumours of a coup, attention quickly shifted to one man trapped right at the centre of this bitter storm, King Charles III. According to worried royal insiders, the monarch appeared increasingly isolated, emotionally drained and deeply torn between defending his beloved wife and preserving long-term stability for the future monarchy Prince William is preparing to inherit. For ordinary people watching the royal family from the outside, this crisis seemed sudden, but palace insiders whisper that for Charles, this intense emotional pressure had been building silently for much longer than the public ever realised. Reports suggest the king spent months trying to balance two worlds that were slowly drifting into a very public, open conflict. On one side stood Queen Camilla, who survived decades of brutal criticism before finally securing the royal crown she had fought so hard to win. On the other stood Prince William, the future king, increasingly determined to shape a monarchy built around strict discipline, absolute control, and long-term institutional survival during a time of deep, terrifying uncertainty. And caught right between those two warring forces was King Charles himself, physically weakened, emotionally exhausted, and desperately struggling to hold together, or i.e., family that was already beginning to fracture beneath the surface. Sources close to palace operations described the monarch as completely devastated by the growing divide between Camilla and Prince William. According to close insiders, Charles initially believed these tensions would cool down naturally behind closed doors, just as royal family feuds always had. But as this relocation scandal intensified and ugly whispers spread through royal circles, the heavy emotional strain reportedly became impossible for him to ignore. Some seasoned palace commentators even claim King Charles appeared increasingly withdrawn in private discussions, knowing that protecting one side only deepened bitter resentment on the other. Those close to the situation suggest the king feared his royal house was drifting toward a dangerous split at the exact moment the family could least afford instability. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly remained absolutely firm in his position. According to royal insiders, he repeatedly insisted his tough decisions regarding the private wing were never acts of personal revenge against Queen Camilla, but necessary actions tied directly to the long-term survival and protection of the British Crown itself. Sources whisper that William had become convinced any emotional hesitation would only allow rival power structures to grow completely, unchecked around the monarchy during King Charles's illness. To some, his approach appeared cold and unyielding. To others, it reflected the mindset of a future king preparing for massive responsibilities far greater than simple family harmony. That stark contrast reportedly created intense emotional tension behind the palace walls, with some veteran courtiers quietly admiring Prince William's bold decisiveness, while others viewed the harsh handling of the situation as unnecessarily brutal. Camilla's personal allies, however, were absolutely furious. Reports suggest key figures within her inner circle believed she had been deeply humiliated in a way that crossed an invisible royal line. According to various insiders, many felt the extreme speed and secrecy of this operation made the situation look less like institutional management and more like a calculated stripping away of her personal influence. That anger allegedly deepened suspicions already growing among warring palace factions split over the monarchy's future direction. But life had to carry on. Catherine, meanwhile, reportedly remained calm and silent throughout the storm. Though insiders claim she quietly supported William's firm belief that the institution required much stricter boundaries during such a fragile period, her silence, much like William's resolve, became a key part of the powerful symbolism surrounding this crisis itself. Royal commentators quickly began comparing these unfolding family tensions to darker moments in royal history, when deep questions of inheritance, power, and succession tore families apart behind closed doors. Some pointed directly to the emotional fractures that surrounded King Edward VIII's historic abdication. Others referenced the painful generational divisions that deeply haunted the royal family after Princess Diana's death. Increasingly, royal observers suggested this current turmoil reflected something far bigger than a simple disagreement over household arrangements. They believed it signalled the initial stages of a broader succession era restructuring already taking shape inside the institution. And with Buckingham Palace refusing to address the growing rumours, speculation only intensified further. Because in royal life, silence rarely ever kills a story. More often it feeds it. But the most chilling part of this crisis was still hidden behind closed doors, because palace insiders now claim this removal may have been just the first stage of a far larger royal restructuring. Behind headlines about tiers and moving boxes, palace, sources claim something far more consequential is already happening. According to whispers circulating through administrative circles, William's decision was never simply about personal belongings. This was reportedly part of a much larger calculated scheme to reshape who holds power in the royal family's next chapter. As gossip swept across Britain and beyond, attention slowly started to shift away from the emotional spectacle itself, turning toward a far more disturbing possibility. What if the relocation drama was not an isolated family squabble after all? What if it actually marked the start of a quiet, carefully calculated restructuring already happening deep inside the monarchy? According to multiple palace insiders, that exact question is now being whispered by courtiers, senior advisors, and even veteran royal observers who believe the institution is already preparing for a future shaped increasingly by Prince William's firm authority, rather than King Charles's signature emotional balancing act. Reports show internal household structures have been undergoing quiet but massive shifts for months, way before the first gossip about Camilla's private wing erupted into a massive public obsession, Staff roles allegedly shifted as certain key advisors gained massive influence, while others started to fade from central decision-making. What once seemed like minor isolated operational tweaks now looks to palace insiders like part of a much larger pattern. According to those familiar with palace workings, William has allegedly taken a far more active role in discussions about long-term royal organisation, succession planning and institutional discipline. Insiders whisper that his growing influence accelerated dramatically during King Charles's ongoing battle with health issues, forcing senior royal figures to face uncomfortable realities about the monarchy's future much sooner than expected. Some insiders even claim that courtiers have quietly started referring to a brand new order forming inside palace operations, a phrase carrying both deep fascination and genuine fear among those uncertain about where they will land once the next reign fully begins. To William's supporters, these changes reportedly represent a necessary modernisation and stronger leadership during an unstable period. But to critics within the institution, this transformation allegedly feels much colder, more controlled, and far less forgiving than the warm, emotional style King Charles attempted to maintain throughout much of his reign. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's social and administrative circle reportedly appears increasingly isolated. According to insider whispers, several long-standing allies who once moved confidently within royal operations are now said to feel deeply uncertain about their future standing. Invitations allegedly became much more exclusive. Informal influence reportedly weakened. Some insiders claim that key figures once close to Camilla have begun quietly repositioning themselves around Prince William's camp in anticipation of major power shifts already taking shape behind closed doors. That gradual unravelling has allegedly intensified major emotional tensions inside the household, especially among those who spent years believing Camilla's role beside King Charles had permanently secured her authority within the institution. Instead, reports suggest the absolute opposite may now be unfolding, a slow erosion of her influence happening not through dramatic public clashes, but through silence, cold distance, and quiet administrative control. Royal historians observing this, Crises have already begun drawing fascinating comparisons to previous historical succession fractures that completely reshaped the monarchy during moments of deep uncertainty. Some point toward court divisions surrounding Queen Victoria's final years. Others point to the quiet political manoeuvring that emerged before George VI's reign stabilised following the dramatic abdication crisis. According to commentators, the monarchy has always undergone invisible internal shake-ups long before any official transition becomes a public reality. And increasingly observers believe this current crisis reflects that exact same historical pattern starting to repeat itself once more. Burning questions are now emerging across royal circles about which figures will remain powerful in the years ahead and which relationships might already be fractured beyond repair. Perhaps most shocking of all are claims from media insiders who believe the royal balance of power has fundamentally shifted inside the House of Windsor. Not publicly, not officially, but emotionally, constitutionally, and symbolically. The relocation of Camilla's personal belongings, according to this rapidly growing theory, may have served as the very first unmistakable warning that William's future monarchy is already starting to define itself behind closed doors, a new monarchy built around tighter control, fewer emotional compromises, and much clearer lines of authority than those that existed under King Charles. And as the palace desperately tried to suppress the growing storm, one final intense moment, reportedly, revealed just how deeply personal this conflict had truly become. According to several dramatic insider accounts, Queen Camilla was left visibly shaken once the harsh reality of the situation fully settled in. Not because of the belongings themselves, but because of what this sudden move symbolized. For the very first time since entering the heart of royal life, reports suggest Camilla may have finally realized that the future palace William envisions might leave far less room for her own influence than anyone ever expected. In the tense days following the private wing controversy, palace insiders began whispering about a highly noticeable change in Camilla's behaviour behind closed doors. According to sources familiar with royal schedules, several private engagements and informal gatherings were quietly scaled back or postponed altogether. While official explanations remained highly vague, royal commentators immediately linked these sudden withdrawals to the massive emotional shock still reverberating through the entire household after the relocation operation. Those close to palace staff claim Camilla appeared deeply wounded, not simply by the physical disruption itself, but by the painful emotional message hidden beneath it. For years she had fought hard to secure acceptance within an institution that once viewed her with suspicion and hostility. She endured relentless publics. Criticism navigated decades of intense controversy and ultimately stood beside Charles during the absolute most difficult chapters of his public life. But, according to insiders, the recent events allegedly forced her to confront an incredibly painful possibility. She had never fully allowed herself to believe that her place inside the monarchy might never have been as permanent or untouchable as it appeared from the outside. Sources now describe her as deeply hurt, humiliated, and emotionally blindsided. Some insiders even whisper that Camilla initially believed King Charles would immediately step in and reverse at least part of the situation once the emotional fallout became completely undeniable. But that intervention reportedly never came in the way she expected. According to Palace commentators, the king found himself trapped between emotional loyalty to his wife and a growing recognition that Prince William was no longer willing to back down from decisions he viewed as necessary for the institution's future stability. That painful realization allegedly deepened Camilla's sense of isolation, because while King Charles continued trying to calm tensions privately, insiders claimed the emotional distance within the family only widened further with each passing day. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly remained completely unwavering, despite backlash building quietly among some royal aides and longtime palace figures. According to those familiar with these internal discussions, William flatly refused to reconsider the broader direction of the changes once they had begun unfolding. Sources suggest he viewed any reversal as a sign of pure weakness during a critical moment when authority inside the monarchy was already being tested by uncertainty, illness, and shifting loyalties. To his supporters, his firmness represented strong discipline and long overdue institutional clarity. But to critics inside palace circles, it felt emotionally ruthless, especially given the deeply personal humiliation now attached to the entire situation. That divide reportedly intensified existing tensions among household staff already highly fearful about what other drastic changes might soon follow. Catherine, however, continued maintaining complete public silence throughout the rapidly growing storm. According to palace insiders, the Princess of Wales purposely stayed far away from the spotlight, knowing that even a tiny gesture or look could spark wild new rumours about this massive royal crisis. Still, sources near the family insist her silent backing for William never faltered in private. Palace aides apparently read her deep quiet not as simple neutrality but as absolute proof that the couple is united on where the crown is heading. This realization just ramped up the panic among royal insiders, where rumours of major shake-ups and staff cuts kept spreading like wildfire among nervous courtiers and aides who are terrified about losing their jobs. Worst of all, royal experts now believe this brutal feud has shattered trust inside the royal family forever. While arguments behind palace walls are nothing new, sources say this specific drama has crossed a line making it almost impossible to fix. This is no longer just a fight over power or royal rules. It is intensely personal now, and with the palace still. Refusing to speak out on the gossip, the public became completely obsessed. Every single silence, every missed event, and every robotic press release only fed the rumours that the royal house is dealing with its most painful behind-the-scenes meltdown in decades. But as the press office frantically tries to spin this insiders believe, the royal family has already crossed a point of no return. When you look closely, this was never just a silly dispute about packing boxes being shifted around the estate, hallways. This is about real power legacy and the harsh truth that the crown under William is going to look completely different from the kingdom that Queen Camilla fought so desperately to find her own place in. What started as quiet gossip about taped-up storage boxes and mysterious late-night moving vans has now blown up into a massive, undeniable scandal in the eyes of royal observers across Great Britain. According to royal writers and palace staff, this bitter fight over Camilla's private rooms will be remembered not just as some silly argument, but as a massive shifting of power inside the House of Windsor. Because under all the glossy headlines lies a harsh reality the family has battled for centuries. True power inside the palace is never truly static. It shifts silently between eras, between clashing personalities, and between very different ideas of what the crown should be. And more observers believe this drama shows the first signs of a major transition already taking place behind closed doors. Prince William, once seen as just a patient, future king waiting quietly in the wings, is now described by staff as a much more ruthless, duty-focused leader than anyone ever expected him to be. New reports reveal that the future monarch is completely determined to lock down control over the family business during a dark time marked by cancer battles, chaos, and deep divisions within the house. For his loyal fans, this tough stance shows true leadership and stability. They think William knows that saving the crown might require cold, hard choices that put the crown way ahead of family feelings. But to his critics, the nasty treatment of Camilla reveals a much colder side. Hiding under his polished exterior, he seems completely willing to tear up palace traditions, no matter who gets hurt. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla faces an incredibly dark and uncertain future unlike anything she has dealt with since marrying into the family. Sources claim the painful toll of this ongoing battle is causing massive stress in private, especially since gossip about her future in the family gets louder every single week. Some commentators think her power will slowly fade away as William takes complete control of the palace. Others say she is safe as long as King Charles stays devoted to her. But either way, one harsh truth is now completely impossible to ignore. That hard-earned security Camilla spent over a decade fighting for is suddenly vanishing before her eyes. Meanwhile, King Charles III is caught right in the middle of a monarchy changing much faster than he ever expected. New leaks portray a stressed-out king torn between protecting his wife and admitting that the crown must move forward with the younger generation. This brutal family divide is taking a massive toll on the king, especially with the press watching his every move, every missed event, and every robotic statement from the press office. The royal family has always used silence as a shield to protect themselves, but right now that quiet is backfiring completely. It breeds mystery feeds, wild conspiracy theories, and lets the public imagine the absolute worst about what is happening behind closed doors. Amidst all this, Catherine is being hailed by commentators as the ultimate rock of the family and the true future of the crown. Calm, perfectly poised, and incredibly calculated in public, she brings the exact kind of stability that William wants for his own upcoming rule. Operating as a tight, unified team, they are working hard to secure their legacy and are now seen as the faces of a much more disciplined, business-like future. A crown ruled not by family feelings but by cold survival. Still, top royal experts are now warning that the deep wounds opened up during this nasty feud will leave scars for a very long time. Once trust is shattered inside a royal house, it never really recovers. And maybe that is the most chilling part of this whole drama. Behind the gold crowns, the grand parades, and the heavily managed public relations lies a messy human story of betrayal, raw ambition, and the devastating price of holding power. Because in this family, every single personal bond eventually gets crushed under the heavy weight of duty. And sometimes when that inevitable collision happens, even the most loving couples and families are torn completely apart. As the heavy palace gates close and the press office goes quiet, one big question still echoes across the country. Was this just a petty family spat or the first real proof that William is already running the show? Thank you for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe, and we will catch you in the next video.